this weekend was something that was, it was a very important weekend for you, right?
Yes.
I want you to share with the people what happened this weekend.
11 years ago, yesterday, the enemy came in like a flood, and God built up a sanctuary. I was at my cousin's house in Niagara Falls, New York, and we were just hanging out, but she was, I don't know, she was dating someone, kind of friends with someone, and he was at the house. He was standing outside smoking a cigarette, and the door was closed, but it was unlocked, and she came in, she was talking to him, she came in, and she said, he's about to leave, and she laid on the floor, and a horn sound, and when the horn sound, the door flung open, the man walked in, he pulled out the gun, he cocked it, he walked up to her, and he said, if you ain't gonna be with me, you ain't gonna be with nobody, and he shot her 3 times in the head. And then he turned to me, he turned the gun towards me, I was sitting on the couch, and I just threw both of my hands up, and I looked over his head, and I just screamed, Jesus, have mercy on me, and he fired. And I screamed, Jesus, have mercy on me, and he fired, and we went back and forth like that until the gun clicked. And he ran out the house, and when he ran out the house, my hands were still raised, and I was just saying, Jesus, Jesus, you know. I was shot, I found out later I was shot in my neck, it's right up where my jugular is, my torso, and my left leg. The bullet that went into the torso, that's the one that bounced around on different organs, and then it lodged on the right side of my spine. It didn't even sever the spine, it just kind of like crushed it, but enough to paralyze me. But I didn't realize that at the time, and so I was sitting on the couch, and I went to look down, and I was like, don't look down, you know, because you're gonna, it's gonna overwhelm you. And so I looked towards where my phone was. It was on the other end of the couch, and I went to reach for it, but my left arm wouldn't move, and so I pushed myself over, and I pulled myself across the couch, and the whole time my cousin was in front of me, and she couldn't move. And I remember there was a point where if I was coming to a place, like if I pulled myself any further, I wouldn't be able to see the door, and the door was like left open. And even though I seen the car pull off, I was still scared. And before I pulled myself over again, I remember saying, you know, God forgive him. I pulled myself over, and then that's when I heard God speak. You know, he said, don't forget the promises that I spoke over your life.
While you were on the floor, you heard God speak to you.
I was on the couch.
While you were on the couch?
Yeah. And he said, don't forget the promises I spoke over your life. And that kind of told me I wasn't going to die. And then he said, I'm going to give you a dance. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's a very weird thing to say. I was thinking more along the lines of ambulance, and we're talking about dancing. This is a little odd, but I just remember thinking, like, yeah, whatever. So I grabbed my phone, and I called 911. And because I kind of grew up in Niagara Falls, like I was born there, and you just knew where everything was. It's like very small. I didn't know the physical address to where I was. And so when I called the police, and they were like, where were you? I don't know. I think even on the 911 tape, when I went later to testify, I said Lanier's house, because that was my cousin's name. Like, they would know what that meant. I didn't know, and so I ended up having to navigate them to where I was, based on the apartment complex and just landmarks and things of that sort. It took like 22 minutes to get there. Yeah, because I didn't know where I was, which is why I never go anywhere without knowing the address now. That's very important. However, I didn't know that day. And so ambulance came, and when they came, they immediately came over to me. You know, the rescue workers, they immediately came over to me, and I was like, no, you know, like I'm fighting with my one good arm. I'm like, no, take my cousin. And they were like, no, we're gonna come back for her. I'm like, take her first, and I'll get the next one. You know, I'm gonna be fine, Like, I really understood that I was gonna be okay. And they were like, well, we just gotta, you know, we're gonna take you first. And then the one guy just pinned my arm, and they picked me up and put me on the board and took me out the house. And I was still, you know, like talking to my cousin saying, hold on, you know, just hang on, it's gonna be all right. I didn't know she was dead. I think I knew, but didn't know. It was still kind of like a movie, but it was my life. you know. And went to the hospital, and when I got to the hospital, they, you know, took off everything very quickly, and they were talking about the wounds and the severity of the wounds. I remember hearing them talking, and they said, well, we're going to give you something for pain. And I said, okay. And so one lady, the room was full of people. I remember that. It was full of people. And the one lady said, well, maybe we should ask her, you know, is there any last words or something like that? And I just remember it came from my right side. And I remember looking over there saying, I'll see you when I wake up. You know, I don't know who it was who said it. I just looked in the direction like, I'll see you when I wake up. When I woke up, I was in a whole other city. I was in Buffalo. They had mercy flighted me from Niagara Falls to Buffalo because Niagara Falls didn't have the equipment at their center to...
Fast forward, then you wake up in Buffalo, the doctors tell you some things, they give you some news. What was the news that they gave you?
They told me that I wouldn't walk again.
Let's trade mics. I got a loud voice. All right.
Yeah, that's better.
They told you what?
They told me I wouldn't walk again.
They told you wouldn't walk again, and what was your response to that?
I said, okay.
And what was their response to you?
The doctor then went, first of all, he was way across the room. I don't know if he thought I was going to jump up, but it was not very good bedside manners, but he was like kind of fire. And he looked to the nurse, and he like whispered something, and then he said, well, I'll be back before you get your next dose of pain meds. He thought I was high, or, you know, I don't know. And so I said, okay. And so he came back, and he said, yes, Miss Nabors, you know, I was here before. I said, I remember you told me I'm not going to walk. Can I get my medicine now? Because we've been waiting on you. And he was like, yeah, I don't know if you understand, like, what that means. I said, it means that my legs do not work. It means that I can't feel them. There's no sensation there. Like, I'm laying here. I feel nothing. I can comprehend. Can I have my medicine now? Because we waited 2 hours for you. Like, I was in extreme pain at that point, you know. And he was like, okay. And so he pulls my family, because my whole family is sitting there. They're like waiting for me to fall apart. And he pulls them out, and him and the nurses, they all huddle up, and they're like talking and playing. I don't know what they were doing. And so he comes back in, and my dad comes in, and he's like, Nicole, he's like, you know what the doctor says? And I said, yeah. And so he was like, okay. And he's like, well, how do you feel about that? I was like, Dad, God said he's going to give me a dance. Can you please tell him to give me my medicine? And he was like, okay. My dad's a minister, so he was like, got it. He was like, that's fine, it's fine. You're going by your book, we're going by ours. I knew that, but now God spoke to the situation. He didn't know. At that point, I didn't have a chance to really talk to anyone about anything, because I think the first 2 days I had like tubes down my throat, so I couldn't even talk.
So moving forward, where did unforgiveness come in? Who were you angry with? Were you angry with anybody?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was angry with my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being in that situation, I didn't know the nature of that relationship.
Right.
So I was angry about that. And while I was in the hospital, I lived in Buffalo. Even though I was from Niagara Falls, when I got out of the military, I moved to Buffalo. Everybody walked away. Everybody. Like all of my friends, or all the people I thought were my friends. And even with family, at some point, everybody disappointed.
Wow.
You know, and so, yeah.
So anger with your cousin, anger with family who abandoned you. Was there ever a point where you were angry at God?
Absolutely.
Please talk about that, because a lot of y'all be angry at people, but how many people have ever been angry at God? Like, God, I've been serving you, I've been faithful, and this happens? Talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. I think it took a while for my anger to get directed towards God, but it eventually went there because when the shooting happened, I was enrolled in seminary in Canada, and so I felt like I was trying to respond to the call of God on my life. My behaviors were still a little jacked up, but I was working on it, right? I was still doing what I needed to do, at least what I thought I should be doing. By going to seminary in Canada, isolating myself, you know, from the situation. And so, yeah, then it became, once I was by myself, and I couldn't walk away from the situation. You know, everybody walked away. I was mad. It was like, well, why'd you Why'd you get me off of the couch? You know, what was the point if everybody was going to abandon me, if everybody was going to do me wrong? You know, I mean, I can't walk away from this. I can't even walk, remember? Like, how could you allow this to happen? You're God. I understand that. I need certain things to be worked on, but you could have done that in any way. Did it have to be like this? Did I have to go through it in this situation? You know, and then it was like, well, what is wrong with me that people didn't see whatever worth that he sees? And it was just looking back. One thing that I realized is that all of those people that walked away or that abandoned or disappointed, they didn't have what I needed at that time. You know, sometimes God calls us into places of isolation so that we can grow and so that we can mature. And if you can't learn to lean on him in your private hours, then, because those are the times of real growth. And when you think about it, those are the times of, it could be either. It could be growth spiritually or it could be destruction, right? Because we do a lot of things by ourselves, and when the doors are closed or people can't see us. And so if we can't begin to get in that closet, you know, like my grandmother used to say, with God and work out those things and confront those things, we're at a miss. You know, it's in a miss because people cannot add to us the things that he wants to bring us to and things that he wants to bring out of us and reveal to us. So looking back, you know, and I think too, if you're honest with yourself, a lot of times when people leave you or reject you or whatever those situations may be, they didn't have what you needed at that time. And sometimes we're searching for things outside of ourselves that we already have within us. If God is sitting on the throne of your heart, then you already have everything you need to get out of any situation, right? Everything you need to go through any situation. And it doesn't really matter what you lost. All of those things can be regained because God is on the throne of your heart.
So you offended with somebody who couldn't even help you anyway. You're giving them room in your heart, and they really couldn't help you the way you needed to be helped anyway.
And we can see that too, even in the example with Jesus. You know, when he went to go pray and everybody was asleep, he was like, really? Y'all can't even help me out? I mean, so if you look at a lot of people in the Bible, they all have those moments of isolation, whether it's Joseph or David or even Jesus, you know, or even Paul. Sometimes he would say it was only one person with him. So you can't always depend on a huge crowd to hold you down because everybody ain't meant to carry your load. And a lot of times people can't even come alongside you because the glory that is on your life, they not equipped to handle.
Come on now.
They're not equipped to handle that. All that hell you do, they can't handle that. You understand? So, yeah, sometimes it's meant to be by yourself.
Amen. Her words was, faith was in trouble.
Yeah, it was.
Faith was pretty much on life support.
Yes.
And just tell us your experience from there until where you are right now.
Oh, boy. Yeah, my faith was on life support. And I think it's because, like, I told him, too, last November, I lost my dog. And that was my steady companion. You know, I had her for like 13 years.
So she was there even before the accident?
Yeah, trivia. She was unconditional. And so when I lost her, I didn't realize it left me not just by myself, but with this wanting for love and affection from something else. And because I wasn't receiving that from people, or it was seasonal or conditional or whatever it was, you know what I mean? I was devastated. I was really devastated. And so that kind of separated me or made my relationship with God indifferent, you know? And so when I came to Glory House, that's where I was. I was at a place of indifference.
Have you ever been indifferent in your faith? Mm-hmm. It is or it ain't? It's whatever it is.
Yep. I was upset. I mean, I could still see the hand of God in my life, the different things that was happening, doors that would be open. And, you know, I would acknowledge it kind of like, okay, yeah, great. You know, it still wasn't enough. I was heated. I was very upset. And since coming here, I don't know, it was like I told you that day in your office, just glory that word represents presence of God or expectation, things of that sort in Hebrew. And so being in Glory House, the place of presence, the place of expectation. I mean, the house fulfills that name, because every time I'm here, I left a little bit different. My faith was increased a little bit more. Talking to God was different. I began to worship again, and those things I hadn't done in a while, because it was indifferent and I was upset. But I learned to move beyond that, because every time in my life, I'm a social worker, so I assess things. Very good at that. Every time in my life that I've decided to rebel or do the opposite of what God is calling me to or what He's saying, it's never worked out good for me. It's never worked out. Isn't that interesting? It's so weird. Like, it's never worked out. And so I had to come to the point where I had to make a decision that I was going to do what God called me to do, whether I was by myself for an extended period, whether the years keep piling up and I continue to wait for His glory to manifest in reference to healing my body. I just had to come to a decision of no matter what, I'm going to do those things, even the hard things. And forgiveness is a process. There's forgiveness or things that come up, and I still have to remind myself, well, I forgive her, and I forgive this, and even too forgiving myself for placing myself in that situation. Forgiving myself for making the wrong decisions that led to having clogged pipes, as you say. Having to forgive these larger things or things on a larger scale, it happened at a place where I had already had previous offenses from my adolescent years, and that led to a road of destruction and rebellion and everything that just leads to things that are destructive and things that ensure that your house isn't standing on good ground. There was a point my house didn't look good on the outside or the inside at all. And so now it's a place of healing, not just spiritually, but just period, just healing my heart, healing myself, reaffirming my self-worth to myself and loving myself, no matter what loves me or who loves me, because God loves me and He saw fit to save me. And so that must be for something. And so even if nobody today or tomorrow or the next year or the year after that doesn't say, I love you, or I don't have a dog that tells me every day that they're excited to see me, I'm still going to love myself. I'm still going to submit to the will of God, because that is what is good for me, And it says to seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto me. Those things can only come when you choose to forgive. Those things can only come when you choose to submit. We say these scriptures and, people throw them around like they're a cliche, but your life has to be a certain way in order to reap the benefits of that. There is no recipe. A lot of times people preach and they say a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they act like they're making soup. This is your life. Your life isn't soup. It's not a recipe of scriptures whereby you can mix them together and then ta-da, it's there. That's another thing I had to forgive. Being taught the wrong way. People make it seem like you go through something and you believe in God and boom, it happens. That's not true. There is something called the sovereignty of God, and sometimes that allows you to wait. I used to pray to be strong and patient. Well, guess what I am now? I won't say those things again. I just thank Him. I thank Him for patience. I don't ask for that stuff no more. We got to be careful. It's only one way to get it. It's just interesting. You just have to be mindful of how you live your life and being able to reap those things. You know, everything in the scripture is true. And like you said, I don't like it all either. I don't. But it's not as simple as the tragedy happens and you turn the page. You have to read in between the lines, because in between those lines is the making of you. That's the journey. That's the climb. And everything that makes you is going to help you to stand once you turn that page and you get to that place of victory. You get to the palace the way Joseph did, or you go from the cave to the castle the way David did. That's the way you do it. You know, that's the way you do it. But those things had to make them. Those was prideful people. Joseph, those are some of my favorite characters. Because I see myself. Prideful, oh, I was that. I was arrogant, all of that. And it was the making of me. He said, I had to humble you. You know, I had to humble you, and I needed you to love you. That way, you're not depending on somebody else. I don't need, when my husband does come, I don't need him to complete me. You know, his love will be in addition to the love that I have for myself. You understand what I'm saying? Because when somebody completes you, it devastates you, it breaks you when they walk away. You know, all of it is the making of you. And things like unforgiveness, they choke those things. They disenable you to love yourself, to help yourself, you know, and to really follow the will of God.
Amen.